Hey everybody, Dustin DePirac here, columnist Andy Graham. We're out here at now Kinnick Memorial Stadium, having just witnessed yet another Indiana loss, 45 to 24. But big story today. Lots of reasons for this loss. Biggest thing being secondary problems, but the big story today, kind of for the future of Indiana football, is the play of Trey Roberson. Basically, he came in today, made his first start, looked pretty good, and it's a pretty big story considering, just what happened yesterday. Obviously, the reevaluation of the commitment of Gunnar Kiel. They just not calling it a decommitment, but I don't think anybody really thinks that he's going to Indiana at this point. So today it's basically Trey Roberson. Not very long ago, you were thinking, okay, maybe he has some kind of role on this team. Maybe he's defensive back in a year. Who knows? At this point, you got to ask yourself the question: is Trey Roberson the kind of the quarterback of the future for Indiana? Is the quarterback for the present for Indiana? Really, had a pretty good outing. 16 of 24. 196 yards and a touchdown, rush for 82 yards to lead the team. So let's just get it going. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I think it helps salve the wound a little bit of the kind of thing. At least it stops the bleeding if it doesn't.
Right.
And I think it was very encouraging, but unfortunately for IU, it was an encouraging performance that was largely wasted because the defense. It was a lot. It was reminiscent of it was reminiscent of the North Texas game, where in the first half. It was almost like they might as well not been on the field, and Iowa had 5 possessions and scored 5 touchdowns and didn't have to work very hard for any of them.
Right.
So there was that aspect of today's game, and like the North Texas game, the defense played a little bit better in the second half. Indiana could have scored more points. I mean, Indiana had 414 yards of offense today, which was a pretty decent performance all day long. They were only 42 yards shy of Iowa's offensive total. They could have scored more points. Indiana was eschewing field goals toward the end, trying to score touchdowns, trying to stay competitive. Could have easily scored 30 or more today.
Right.
So from that element, it was very good. And Roberson, that was really impressive. I mean, he was 7 for 7 in the first half. Didn't miss a throw. Didn't miss a throw of any kind until he tried a deep post to Jamon Chester in the second half, and overthrew that. But later hit on the same play on another deep post to Chester. Once he kind of, it looked like he was fairly comfortable, fairly calm from the start. Right. And I think the staff did a good job of calling plays that accentuated his strengths. I mean, it was within their normal offensive package. Kevin Wilson talked about the fact that they reduced their offensive package a bit 3 or 4 weeks ago. So it was still within that context, but there were still plays that he could execute well and that he could showcase his strengths with.
Yeah, no, I mean, they did a lot that they could use his speed. And Trey is, there's not necessarily, of the 3 guys that they've used as a quarterback, they don't have necessarily a slow guy. I mean, Dusty Kiel is pretty fast, straightforward, in and of himself, and Ed is faster than him. But Trey's faster than both of them. I mean, Trey's got a ton of speed.
He is fleet of foot.
Yeah, I mean, he can move. Obviously, he did a lot of that for Lawrence Central last year. His numbers were PlayStation-esque. But he was pretty good today, using a lot of that speed that really kept Iowa just off balance when they had to deal with him and Houston. Okay, you're going to fake a handoff, you're going to run a zone read. Who are you going to go after? One way or the other, it's going to be a tough guy to catch. And that did a lot for him. And he was able to obviously play a lot off the running game. In the passing game, did a lot of kind of like sprint out stuff. And, they made it kind of easy for him. And did a lot of stuff when he was kind of making first progression reads. And they were able to do a lot to get open. I mean, there were, a lot of the passes he made were easy, but he made the smart decision. He made the right decision. A lot of times it was short passes, but, he moved the football. I mean, he moved the chains better than anybody has in recent weeks that have major, both Dusty and Ed had really, really tough weeks. And I think it was, did a lot for the offense that Trey was able to do something. Now, this wasn't as good a defense as those 2 guys played.
Iowa ranks, I was just going to say you're right. I'm glad you brought that up because Iowa ranked number 9 in the league in total defense.
That's a team that's been really skewered by like NFL draftees. I mean, they had 2 years ago that Iowa defense was incredible.
Yeah, they guys like Claiborne running around out there.
Those guys graduate. Those guys get drafted. It's tough at a school like Iowa where there's not this sort of hotbed like there is maybe in Ohio or someplace like that where you just always have this level of talent. Iowa's always got to go into some they can do a pretty decent bit with what they get in the state, but they've really got to go out of state to get a bunch of stars, and it's tough to keep replenishing that, especially when you get a really good team together. It's tough to kind of keep that going to stay on that level, but one way or another, Trey played really well.
Having said that, he made some plays today and showed some things that even good defenses would have a hard time handling. I mean, he's got some elusiveness that even against really good athletes that are well set up and playing well, they're going to have some issues trying to contain him. And so that was good to see from an Indiana point of view. It's one of those things where this season where you're just trying to improve, you're trying to get better, you're trying to make steps forward instead of steps, instead of regressing, which the defense seems to be doing right now, unfortunately, but for Indiana. But nevertheless, if you're looking for signs, Gunnar was the kind of guy that, the kind of recruit at that level that really gave people a reason to look forward and say, what, we know this is a tough year, but maybe better things are coming. That kid's coming in, maybe things will get better. And then that was taken away this week. What today did was, give them something else to hold on to for a little bit, and that was and that's very valuable. I mean, that's something that this program needs right now. It needs to, people need a reason to buy tickets. People need a reason to want to watch.
Right.
And Trey Roberson showed some things today that are worth watching.
Yeah. The question I think becomes for Indiana really is: so, do you then not recruit a quarterback in this class? I think that's a very good question, is because basically if you recruit a true freshman, then you recruit another true freshman who's way, way better. Or not way, way better. Obviously, Trey did a lot. I mean, he was Mr. Indiana football, so it's not like that was a poor recruit or anything like that. He obviously did a lot, and he always got a lot of talent. But, I mean, Gunnar Kiel was at a higher caliber as in terms of a recruit. There were things that he can do that Trey probably can't. Now, Trey's faster, obviously, but Gunnar's the type of guy that, that's a high-level pro-style quarterback right there. But, now you've got a true freshman. Do you bring in somebody immediately behind him, or do you give him some faith? And I wonder, you had to wonder if, God knows he would never say it. But if Trey doesn't get some confidence this week, knowing, okay, there's not a guy right on my heels. I'm not learning this offense and figuring this out just to have somebody come right behind me and beat me for this job. You got to wonder if that added to his confidence to say, you know what, maybe they'll put some faith in me now. Maybe they won't try, there's not another Gunnar Kiel to be found in the state of Indiana. I don't know that they can, I highly doubt there's any chance they could recruit somebody of that caliber. Maybe what it's time to do is just say, you know what, at least for a year, let's give Trey some space. Let's not throw in another quarterback behind him to make him feel, all this pressure. I mean, at some point, you've got to let a quarterback not look over his shoulder, and maybe that's what they need to do.
I understand that, and I agree with it up to a point. But let's face it, given Gunnar's decommitment, let's go ahead and call it for what I think it is, actually. But even though it's not that officially, and we all kind of know, but. Once again, if we presume that Gunnar's not coming, maybe Dusty Keel's future with the program is problematic, and I don't want to lay that on that kid because he should.
But you still have Ed.
But you still have Ed, but that's all you have. Essentially,
you have Adam Follett. Honestly, everyone forgets about him, and I don't know if he's been bad at practice. He has good arm. He's not a bad third-string quarterback.
Well, you have him for one more year, I guess. But I'm just looking at a depth chart for next year, thinking about injury. If that happens, what happens? So I might try and bring in another guy who I think could play. He might not necessarily challenge Ed for a starting job right away, but given that most of the recruiting's over now, I mean, it's not necessarily going to be the sort of situation you can. Recruit, find a guy now that's going to be able to step in.
I mean, you're not going to get a 4-star, 5-star quarterback right now if you're Indiana. I mean, somebody else.
Maybe.
There are 4-star and 5-star.
Somebody's going to get one because somebody's going to get Gunnar.
Right, exactly. But I don't know. Maybe that's kind of what they have to do. Is Trey came in here and once they had Gunnar Kiel, it was almost like, okay, well your clock is running.
And you might end up in a different position.
Yeah, or something.
Whatever,
but finally, all of a sudden, maybe that changed things for Trey. I guess we got to go to talk about other stuff that happened in the game today real quick because we got about a minute and a half. Defense got skewered. I guess one thing was just a blown coverage. Really, I think there was like two linebackers and Alex Webb ran into both of them and knocked them over, and that led Marvin McNutt wide open for an 80-yard. But there was a couple other plays. Marvin McNutt had single coverage, and other teams have attacked that. I mean, Kevin Wilson said it's tough to find a balance. So it's like, okay, like if you're not playing man straight up press, then you're sitting back in these soft zones and you're getting picked apart. So then you look like you're not trying. But then you go man to man press and they go single coverage and they take Marvin McNutt over the top of Greg Heatman. Greg Heatman's a good athlete, but Marvin McNutt's winning that.
But I think part of it's technique. I mean, I don't think it's just athleticism. Yeah,
Marvin
McNutt is 6'4".
Heatman and Hunter both. Yeah.
He's 6'4", and but here's the thing. I like press coverage. I like man coverage. I didn't like how Indiana played it today because their cornerbacks would fixate on the man and just be in the chest of the man, and never once the entire day did I see an Indiana cornerback look for a ball.
Right.
Not once.
But
and you just can't play like that.
Sure, but you know who you have. I mean, I guess in both cases you're playing desperate.
They're in position to make a play if they look for the ball. I'm sorry.
I think they were still losing that battle. At the end of the day, I think Marvin McNutt is just going to beat Michael Hunter. He's going to beat Greg Heatman.
But you're going to give yourself a chance if you find the ball. I didn't see anybody
finding
the ball.
Turn, but that's the thing. They were behind.
And that includes the defensive line. When they're rushing Vandenberg, they couldn't find the ball then either.
No, that's true. But they couldn't. I don't know. So it's an interesting question. How do you kind of solve that situation when you've got a receiver who's clearly on a higher level,
Good.
athletically. So they're not doing it very well.
Coke cards.
So Andy's
cards.
rooting. Game 3 tonight. We'll be on the road. We'll try to find it on some kind of radio station. Anyway, thanks as always. Stick with us.